Welcome to the Chaka Strategy Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Chaka Strategy Podcast with Chaka Patterson. Chaka is a legal career strategist, former public company general counsel, former Fortune 100 treasurer, and head of investor relations, and former AmLaw 50 partner who helps lawyers turn their legal expertise into business impact. I'm Sean O'Connor, and today Chaka and I are talking about why every general counsel needs financial fluency. Chaka, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I am great. You know, what strikes me about this is on its face, it seems self-evident, I guess, but that you know, if you're working in that field, that you would have some grasp of the numbers. But why? You know, I think I know why this is important. But you know, from your point of view, what does financial fluency sort of even mean for a general counsel?
Yeah. So what it really means is that beyond the numbers, you should understand the numbers, obviously, but what story is the numbers or are the numbers telling? And that's really financial fluency. So it's one thing to understand that EPS means earnings per share,
Right.
but why did the board choose that particular earnings number? Why is compensation set to that particular earnings number? How is that earnings number determined? And what are the legal implications? So, for example, in a public company, general accepted accounting principles versus non-GAAP non-GAAP adjustments to get to the earnings per share number, and have the non-GAAP numbers been appropriately calculated, have the things that have been excluded from the earnings per share reported number, are they appropriate from a legal and risk perspective? So, financial fluency really is understanding the story behind the numbers.
Yeah, it's interesting when you say, story, I think narrative, I think about something that, in speaking to attorneys all the time, that, there's the law, and then there's essentially the argument, the story that you're trying to tell. I would think it would be not exactly second nature, but, somewhat, again, something that they'd understand. Why do you think lawyers feel so uncomfortable discussing financial concepts generally?
Yes, I think it's two things. I think one, a lot of lawyers assume that there's just going to be a lot of math, maybe even higher math
Yeah, I hear you.
associated with finance, and so a lot of people went to law school by default because they wanted to avoid math or avoid numbers.
Yeah,
And then
engineering
I
or
think there's
law.
right, exactly. And then I think there's a psychological piece where lawyers are trained to project a sense of expertise, a sense of competency, and so admitting that you don't know something makes it feel like you are admitting that you are incompetent in a particular area, and
Yeah,
that's just a very uncomfortable place for lawyers to be because it's just so inconsistent with our training.
Yeah. The sort of self-image comes into play there.
Exactly.
I don't know. I mean, you have some historical perspective on this, but why is it that financial fluency has become such an important skill for today's legal leaders? Is there something in just the business realm today that makes it especially important?
Yeah, so I think, honestly, I think it has always been important. I think the general counsel who are really successful have always understood that they needed to connect their legal advice to business impact. And the only way to do that is to truly understand the business, how it makes money, how it's positioned in its industry, how the industry is positioned, in the economic world. I think why it's become more popular, I would say, is in the age of AI, so much of what keeps people busy in-house is being automated and will continue to
Mm.
be automated. And so, so for example, if I were in-house today, I would be doing a job audit because I feel like, how much of my time is spent sitting shoulder to shoulder with the business, jointly problem solving,
Mm.
versus how much of my time is at my desk in front of my computer. The more time you spend at your desk in front of your computer, the more your job is at risk, right? Because AI will be able to do a lot of that. What AI will not be able to replace is that sitting shoulder to shoulder, jointly problem solving, because that's where judgment and experience
Mm.
come
Right.
into play. But that judgment and experience are not useful to the business if you don't even understand what the business does, how it actually makes money, how it's positioned within its industry, how the industry is positioned within the global economy. What are the headwinds and tailwinds
Yeah.
that the industry and the business are dealing with, and how are they positioned to take advantage of tailwinds or get out in front of headwinds? So if you
Yeah.
can't do those things, you just can't add a lot of value. And if you are defaulting to, sitting behind your desk, redlining contracts or managing outside counsel, that job is going to go away.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too. I hear a couple things in that this siloing of expertise is not the best because there's even people that aren't in the legal realm. There's executives over there that have to understand as well. Hey, I need to,
That's right.
I need and I want to understand how the business runs and need to demonstrate to them. I think that my point of view, the legal point of view, is part of this overall strategy for the company's success. That's interesting to me. Um, Also, I was wondering, and again, we only sort of know the times we live in, but it seems to me I mean, even before AI, thinking about, biotech, technology in general, and the IPOs that are happening and the pace of that. I'm wondering if that too is another reason why, uh, General Counsel needs some a better grasp of the numbers because there's so much activity there. But
Yeah. So look, I think that's a fair assessment, that as the velocity of business has picked up,
Mhm.
enabled by technology, as the scope of business has become more global, more complex, and runs at a much faster pace, it is essential that general counsel, people, in the in-house legal department generally, really have to understand both the macro and micro impacts on the business.
Mhm.
And to do that, you have to really understand the business, how it works, how it makes money,
Yeah.
how it's measuring value, all those kinds of things.
Got it. What do you think, if you had to, you know, point them out, what do you think the most important financial metrics or concepts uh, that every general counsel should understand?
Yeah, so I think first, revenue recognition, right? That's the top
Yeah.
line.
Yeah. Yeah.
Second, margin. So how much money do we make selling our product or services? Um, all the various earnings numbers, particularly earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, shorthanded as EBITDA, because when you're doing,
EBITDA. I always is it EBITDA, EBITDA,
yeah,
Schlemiel,
tomato,
Schlemazel.
tomato, right? So I say EBITDA, and so I think that because, so for example, right, in transactions, you often are doing either a revenue multiple or an EBITDA multiple
Yeah.
for valuing the business. And so really understanding that. And then, of course, understanding depreciation, amortization, because those are areas where you often find red flags in terms of how business is running things through the income statement. Understanding capitalizing versus expensing, because again, those are areas where there could potentially be red flags. And so right, capitalizing, it sits on the balance sheet, moves over to the income statement over time. Expensing moves over to the income statement right away, reducing profits. So that's why it's very important to understand that. And then, of course, profits. And then if you're in a public company, understanding how the profits are divided up. And so earnings per share, and understand, and that's usually a big compensation metric in public companies. And so really understanding what that means, how it's calculated, what the expectations are around it. So I think that those are the things that general counsel really need to understand.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so much of what you just described are, they're transactions, and lawyers are reviewing the contracts around transactions and acquisitions and all that. It's again, it's so, it's just a hair's breadth away from the actual, the CFO role, it seems like sometimes.
Yeah, well, and what's interesting is once you really understand a lot of the financial concepts, you then put yourself in a position where you are still in command of the room and you are shaping decisions even when the CFO is in the room. Because a lot of times there are opportunities for the legal department to generate substantial economic value, particularly through contracting. So there's a concept, working capital turnover, right? And so working capital is just current assets minus current liabilities. So how much do we have, and how much do we have allow us to cover our monthly bills, right? Simple way to think about it. And then how much of our revenue is being used to create more opportunities for the business, being able to use the revenue more efficiently. Yeah, and so a lot of that is going to deal with contracting, right? So a unsophisticated lawyer or not financially fluent lawyer will say, oh, our assignment is to draft the vendor agreement, and they go off and draft the vendor agreement. A financially fluent lawyer says, okay, what will the terms of this vendor agreement do to our working capital turnover? And is there opportunities for us to add meaningful value here? So, for example, can we push net 60 payments to net 90? Right? And every time we're able to hold on to more cash, that cash you can use it. It's that simple, right? It's no different than in your own financial, personal financial. If you think about it, if you could put yourself in a position where your employer pays you every 30 days, but you don't have to pay any of your bills for 90 days, you literally have 60 days of cash that you can invest or, otherwise put to work. It's no different in a business. And that largely falls on the legal department. And so it's a much different seat at the table when you walk in and say, hey, what we've done is we've drafted this vendor agreement in a way that has increased our accounts payable, right? Has increased the time that we have to actually pay our bills. And that increases our working capital turnover. And therefore
Cash
creates
flow.
more value, right?
Yeah.
And
Great.
so
Wow.
that is a seat at the table that's as that is on par with everybody else in the C-suite versus just being on the receiving end of
Yeah.
instruction.
Like an internal vendor, so to speak. Yeah.
Right.
It's interesting. I was wondering about, okay, I'm in General Counsel. I've got some financial literacy, fluency, and you just described a scenario that, by having that, it changed the approach to the contract, the vendor contract. Are there other scenarios, another scenario where having that fluency changes the way a lawyer approaches business decisions?
Sure. So, like, I've worked with a general counsel who had a situation where their board decided that the new compensation metrics were going to be around earnings per share and working capital turnover. And so she convened the CFO, the chief human resources officer, the chief accounting officer, and the head of investor relations to make sure that all the disclosures were appropriate for that change. That's the protection piece. But then she went a step further and said, okay, now I want to review all of our vendor agreements and see where we can increase our working capital turnover, right? Which is generally going to be paying out instead of net 60, if we can push it out to net 90. Any days we can increase our payments to vendors increases the working capital turnover, but also thinking about, okay, how else can we think about creating value? So she looked at the accounts receivable, particularly the bad debt collection, right? And there's, there's a lot of times where, businesses will,
don't get paid.
Write off,
Yeah.
some portion of accounts receivable, right? So for people who don't know, accounts receivable is just an IOU, right? You've rendered a service, provided a product, the recipient owes you money for having done that. They have yet to
Sometimes
pay.
they don't pay.
And then sometimes they don't pay. And so how do we reduce the times that they don't pay? And what can we do contractually to make it onerous for them not to pay? Can we put in, hefty escalating penalties? Can we put in mandatory arbitration? Can we, mandatory 30-day decisions, right? Can we think of all the bells and whistles we can put into our contracts with our customers that make sure that we actually get paid? And again, that is a substantial amount of cash flow coming into the business. And every time the business is able to invest that cash flow, right, that investment income goes right onto the income statement. And so not only have you increased working capital turnover, you've also increased income, right?
Yeah.
And so, a financially savvy GC, again, isn't just an order taker, an internal vendor. They are actually a strategic partner thinking about what can we do in our part of the business to increase the overall profitability of the entire business.
It's just powerful. You know what I mean? Like, it's powerful for the business. It's powerful for your career as an attorney, to be able to, and even to, like, I'm thinking too, if I were, I'll say, interviewing for such a position, to be able to demonstrate having financial fluency and communicating how that benefits the organization and adds value in the C-suite. I mean, I think that's just a powerful just skill set. I mean, as you,
Yeah, because look, I think the other thing that you're going to see again in the age of AI, if so think it was Thomson Reuters did this really powerful survey of 2,300 general counsel and their C-suite peers, and just asked a simple question: does the legal department add significant value to the corporate objectives? 86% of the GC survey said yes. Only 17% of their C-suite peers agreed. 42% said that 42% said they add little to no value.
Oh, geez.
So
Okay.
in the age of AI, that's going to be a situation where then the CEO, the CFO, the CHRO are looking, saying, why do we have so many lawyers?
Yeah.
What is it that
man.
they do when when all of this stuff can be automated, right? Because if they're not adding value to the corporate objectives, if they're just order takers, it seems to me somewhere in here we can automate order taking.
Yeah.
If
Well,
they are judgment providers, if they
Mm-hmm.
are strategic thinkers, if they are generating revenue, earnings,
Insight.
tying all their, helping us make money, helping us take advantage of tailwinds and get in front of headwinds, then we should have them around.
Yeah. Well, that's a great place to end. I mean, this idea of future-proofing yourself for the economy and such. And Chaka, hate to cut you short. We're out of time, but I look forward to connecting on a future episode. Thanks so much for your expertise and point of view.
Thank you.
You bet. That's it for today's episode of the Chaka Strategy Podcast with Chaka Patterson. If today's conversation resonated with you, go even deeper with Chaka's book, The Hot Seat: Mastering the Public Company General Counsel Role. Available now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and wherever books are sold. If you'd like to learn more about Chaka's workshops for legal teams, executive coaching, executive education courses, and other resources for legal professionals, visit the website chakastrategy.com. Thanks for listening. Be sure to leave a review, and subscribe so you don't miss future conversations on leadership, business strategy, and career growth for lawyers. I'm Sean O'Connor. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.